I have shown you how Constantinople fell to its enemies. I have shown you how Jerusalem fell to its saviors. But this story is different. This is the day Constantinople was destroyed by the very men who swore to protect it. April 13th, 1204. Smoke rises over the Hagia Sophia. The greatest church in Christendom, a building that has stood for 700 years, is being looted. But the men tearing it apart are not Muslims. They are not pagans. They are not barbarians from the steppes. They are Christians. They are Crusaders, the same Crusaders who left Europe with a sacred oath to liberate the Holy Land from Islam. Instead, they stand here, inside the holiest church in the Christian world, stealing its gold, smashing its icons, drinking wine from sacred chalices. A prostitute sits on the patriarch's throne, singing songs. How did soldiers of God end up destroying God's greatest house? The answer begins with a blind old man and a debt that could not be paid. 1202, Venice, the most powerful trading city in the Mediterranean. Its ruler is called the Doge, and his name is Enrico Dandolo. He is 90 years old, and he is completely blind. But behind those dead eyes lives the sharpest political mind in Europe. Dandolo has one obsession: money. Venice runs on trade. And the biggest obstacle to Venetian trade is Constantinople. The Byzantine Empire controls the sea routes, charges taxes on every Venetian ship, and just years ago imprisoned and expelled thousands of Venetian merchants from the city. Dandolo remembers. Some say he lost his sight in Constantinople itself, blinded during an anti-Venetian riot decades earlier. Whether true or not, one thing is certain. Enrico Dandolo hates Constantinople, and now fate is about to hand him the perfect weapon. 30,000 Crusaders have just arrived in Venice. They need ships. They have no money to pay, and the blind old man is smiling. The Crusaders needed Venice. Only Venice had enough ships to carry an army across the sea to Egypt, the planned target of the Fourth Crusade. The price: 85,000 silver marks, an astronomical sum. The Crusaders gathered everything they had. Knights sold their horses. Soldiers melted their armor for silver. One French knight, Robert de Clary, later wrote that he arrived in Venice with nothing but his sword and his faith. He believed God would provide. God did not. Venice did. It wasn't enough. They were still 34,000 marks short. And that is exactly what Dandolo had been waiting for. The blind Doge made his offer. Venice would forgive the debt if the Crusaders would make one small stop on their way to Egypt. A Christian city called Zara on the coast of modern Croatia had rebelled against Venice. "Take Zara for us," Dandolo said, "and we will call it even." A crusade. Attacking a Christian city, the Pope himself sent a letter forbidding it. He threatened to excommunicate anyone who participated. The Crusaders read the letter and attacked Zara anyway. After Zara, the crusade should have sailed to Egypt. The Holy Land was waiting. Jerusalem was waiting, but then a visitor arrived at the Crusader camp. His name was Alexios Angelos. He was young, desperate, and royal. His father, Emperor Isaac II, had been overthrown and blinded by his own brother. Alexios had escaped and now begged the Crusaders for help. His offer was extraordinary. "Restore me to the throne of Constantinople, and I will give you 200,000 silver marks, 10,000 soldiers for your crusade, and, most important of all, I will unite the Eastern and Western churches under the Pope." 200,000 marks. That was more money than the kings of England and France had combined. And the union of churches, the dream of every pope for a century. Dandolo's blind eyes saw the opportunity before anyone else. The crusade changed course. Instead of Egypt, instead of Jerusalem. The army of God, already excommunicated for attacking one Christian city, now sailed toward the greatest Christian city on earth. The Crusaders believed they were making a quick stop. Restore the prince, take the money, sail to Jerusalem. They had no idea that they would never reach the Holy Land. None of them. Ever. In June 1203, the Crusader fleet appeared before Constantinople, and the men from France, from Flanders, from the small towns of Europe fell silent. Robert de Clary, the same poor knight who had arrived in Venice with nothing but a sword, wrote in his Chronicle, "Since the creation of the world, no city had ever been so rich." He described palaces that stretched for miles, churches with more gold than all of France, markets selling spices from lands he couldn't name. 200,000 people lived here. Paris had 30,000. London, 25. These were the walls that had survived 23 sieges over 900 years. The Theodosian walls, triple layered, 40 feet high, with a moat wide enough to drown an army. The same walls that would hold for 250 more years until a 21-year-old sultan finally broke them with the largest cannon the world had ever seen. But in 1203, it was not a sultan who came for these walls. It was the men with crosses on their chests. The plan was simple. Attack Constantinople, put Alexios on the throne, collect the money, and sail to the Holy Land. The first part worked. In July 1203, the Crusaders assault the city walls by sea. The blind Doge Dandolo, 90 years old, completely blind, stood at the prow of his ship in full armor, the banner of Venice in his hands, and commanded his men to ram the shore. He was the first man off the boat. The Byzantines panicked. Emperor Alexios III, the usurper who had blinded his own brother, fled the city in the night with the treasury. Young Alexios was placed on the throne alongside his blind father Isaac. The Crusaders had done it. Now came the payment. It never came. The treasury was empty. The usurper had taken it. Young Alexios couldn't deliver the 200,000 marks. He couldn't deliver the soldiers. He couldn't unite the churches. Everything he had promised was a lie. Not because he was dishonest, but because he had promised what didn't exist. For 6 months, 30,000 armed crusaders camped outside the richest city on earth, unpaid, angry, and running out of food. Dandolo watched and waited. Months passed. Tensions grew. Small fights broke out between Crusaders and Byzantine citizens. Then in August 1203, a group of Crusaders set fire to a mosque in the Muslim quarter of the city. The fire spread and spread and did not stop for 3 days. Nikitas Choniates, a Byzantine historian who lived through the siege, wrote that the fire consumed everything from the harbor to the Hagia Sophia. He watched his own neighborhood burn. He gathered his family and walked through streets choked with smoke, carrying his children, stepping over the bodies of neighbors who hadn't made it out. 100,000 people lost their homes in a single fire. The Byzantine people turned against Alexios IV. In January 1204, a mob strangled him in his cell. A new emperor took the throne, Alexios V, called Mortzouphlos for his thick eyebrows. He refused to pay the Crusaders a single coin. Mortzouphlos slammed the city gates shut and stared at the Crusaders from the walls. His message was clear: leave. You will get nothing. The Crusaders looked at the richest city on earth, the city that owed them, the city full of gold. They did not leave. On April 9th, 1204, the Crusaders attacked Constantinople for the second time. But this time, they were not here to restore a prince. They were here to take the city for themselves. The first assault failed. The walls held. Byzantine defenders fought with everything they had. For 4 days, it looked like Constantinople would survive, as it had survived every siege for 9 centuries. Then on April 12th, the wind changed. Venetian ships pushed against the seawalls. Soldiers leaped from ship masts onto towers. A small gate was found, broken open. A handful of Crusaders poured through, then more, then hundreds. Emperor Mortzuflos fled the city in the night, just like the emperor before him, just like the one before that. Constantinople, the city that never fell, was open. And what followed was not a conquest, it was an annihilation. For 3 days, the Crusaders were given permission to take whatever they wanted. They took everything. They stripped the Hagia Sophia, gold, silver, jewels, like sacred relics. Everything that wasn't stone was stolen or smashed. They melted down bronze statues that had stood for 1,000 years to make coins. They destroyed the imperial library. Manuscripts that existed nowhere else on earth, gone. Knowledge that could never be recovered. They killed thousands. They did things to the women of the city that the chronicles describe, but I will not. They desecrated every church. They turned altars into drinking tables. And they did this not to an enemy, not to an infidel city. They did this to the heart of the Christian world. Nikitas Choniates, the historian who had already survived the Great Fire, gathered his family one last time. His home was gone. His neighborhood was gone. The city he loved was being torn apart around him. A Venetian merchant he knew, a friend, escorted his family through the chaos to the city gates. As Choniates walked out of Constantinople for the last time, he turned and looked back. He wrote, "O city, city, eye of all cities, subject of tales across the whole world, nurse of churches, leader of faith, you have drunk from the hand of the Lord the cup of his fury." The Crusaders carved up Constantinople. They created a new state, the Latin Empire, and placed a French count on the throne. Dandolo took the best part, harbors, islands, and a quarter of the city itself. Venice became the greatest naval power in the Mediterranean. The blind old man had won. He died 1 year later. He is buried in the Hagia Sophia, a conqueror's grave in a church he helped destroy. The Byzantines eventually took their city back in 1261. But it was never the same. The population fell. The walls crumbled. The treasury stayed empty. The empire that had been the shield of Christianity for 1,000 years was now a shadow, and 250 years later, when a young sultan named Mehmed arrived with 80,000 soldiers and the largest cannon ever built, those weakened walls, that depleted treasury, that broken empire, could not hold. Constantinople had asked for help against the Turks. That call became the Crusades. The Crusades led to Zara, then to this betrayal. And this betrayal led to the fall that ended it all. The city that asked for help was destroyed by the help that came. I have now shown you 3 chapters of one story, a city that called for help, the holy war that answered, and the betrayal that sealed its fate. But history has more to show. There are empires I have not yet spoken of, wars that have not been told, falls that have not been witnessed. Until next time.